We're investing to ensure that Australians will be in the leading pack of the world.
Our goal is always under-promise, over-deliver. We expect that Australians will be fully vaccinated by the end of October.
This is a really, really exciting time.
We're on track to complete this vaccination by the end of October.
We were clear a month ago that the October deadline would not include the second dose. It's important to stay up to date on where the goalposts are on this.
Beset by supply issues, missed deadlines and shifting medical advice, the federal government's vaccine rollout has become a movable feast.
The vaccine are likely to be rolled out by the end of this year to all those Australians who want that vaccine. And there's assumption that they'll get those 2 doses by that time.
But that could happen with 2 doses, 1 doses. It could be many months either side of that.
The Morrison government is feeling the heat over the failings in aged care.
We're comfortable about where we're at. Everybody would have liked to have done it faster.
The federal government is also feeling the heat over its constitutional responsibility for quarantine, while thousands of Australians are stranded overseas.
The quarantine capacity remains the constraining factor. There are plenty of planes...
But why aren't you dealing with that then? If that's the constraint, isn't that the problem we've got to solve?
Absolutely it is.
So why isn't the Commonwealth solving it, like opening quarantine facilities, running them, using the ADF?
As you understand, Chair, the Commonwealth obviously doesn't have a public health capacity. The real limiting factor in increasing quarantine capacity is the availability of trained medical professionals.
For months, state governments have been proposing alternative sites for quarantine centres, and on Friday, the Morrison government finally proposed new centres in Melbourne and Brisbane. The Special Senate Committee on COVID has been one of the few places where officials have been publicly questioned about their advice to the government. Labor Senator Katy Gallagher is the chair of that committee, and I spoke with her a short time ago. Katy Gallagher, thanks for joining us. What have you been hearing from officials over the last 12 or 18 months about the vaccine rollout and supply?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. We've been tracking this pretty closely. I mean, it was pretty clear early on in the pandemic that vaccines are really our ticket out of a lot of the restrictions we were living under and the lockdowns that many Australians tonight are living under. So we have been having a look at it pretty closely. I think pretty early on it emerged there were concerns around the numbers of deals that we had in place, the logistics about rolling out a vaccine and who was responsible for what, and also some of the secrecy around the decisions that led to the vaccine deal and some of the medical advice that supported it. And I think that's been, highlighted with some of the inconsistent messaging around the vaccine and, who should have what and when it's going to be available and how high you have to have levels before we can look at some of these restrictions easing. So all of that has been part of the committee's inquiry. And in fact, in December last year, we made findings about this, urging the government to act with a bit more urgency and purpose and leadership on the vaccine rollout to avoid some of the problems we're having today.
Well, there's been evidence given to the Committee on Vaccines even up until last week about how all of that unfolded or didn't unfold. What's your bottom line take on why we've ended up in this situation, why we don't have more Pfizer, why we don't have a bigger suite of vaccine options?
Well, some of it's secret. I mean, that information isn't available to the public, so they're the decisions taken by Professor Murphy and his group of experts about why the government should have the deals they had, why they put so much effort in or eggs in the AstraZeneca basket and didn't diversify. That information is not clear and it's seemingly not available to the public. But certainly we've been hearing advice around the logistics, the targets the government set themselves. Pretty early on, those targets looked unreachable. Other experts were saying that's the case, yet the government kept insisting they could meet them. They've failed every single one of them. So I think there's an issue now around trust with what the government says. The changing advice on AstraZeneca has led to confusion as well about the program. And again, supply and access to vaccine for those that do want it has been a problem based on those original decisions taken many months ago but hidden from public view.
And what about quarantine? We've now sort of seeing the state starting to jack up and say, look, hotels no good, we've got to reduce the caps. What have the officials told us about why the quarantine system has evolved as it has?
Well, I think from the get-go, the officials have appeared and said basically this is the state's responsibility. The states took the decision at National Cabinet and the Commonwealth has this hands-off approach. It's not our responsibility. We've been trying to test that because it's pretty clear to, I think, everyone else that Commonwealth has responsibility for quarantine. And so their lack of urgency, lack of leadership, lack of interest almost in how that operates has been, I think, really concerning to the committee, and again has led to the problems where we find ourselves with half the country in lockdown tonight because quarantine isn't fit for purpose, and the breakouts have come from hotel quarantine and have led to these lockdowns. I can't for the life of me think why the Commonwealth kind of has abrogated their responsibility up until seemingly last week when they've decided we'll go and look for some land. Well, we've been asking that for months, and all the advice, even just a month ago, was we haven't been asked to get involved, you know.
Well, you were a health minister for 8 years as well as a chief minister here in the ACT. What's your view of what is possible in terms of planning and what should have been done in the last 12 months? What could have been done to avoid these things?
Well, I think some clear role delineation, who's responsible for what, would have helped. It's clear the states have had a lot of operational responsibility, but when it comes to vaccine and quarantine, clearly Commonwealth responsibilities, they should have grabbed that and made sure they were all over it. And it doesn't appear that that's been the approach from Mr Morrison at all. He's been much more prepared to blame others or, you know, shift it back out to the states and not take that leadership role. That's what's been missing. And when you don't have someone leading from the top, the bureaucracy isn't going to lock in behind. And I think that's been shown in the problems that we've had and where we find ourselves tonight.
Katy Gallagher, thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks very much, Laura.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.